Hey everyone, in this video we're going over a generalized lower body dynamic warm-up series that you can use to help make sure that your muscles, your joints, and your nervous system in your lower body are all prepped and ready to go before diving into your next workout. Now, if you want to follow along with a visual overview of the exercises in this series, you can grab the free PDF of all of these dynamic warm-up series over on my Buy Me a Coffee page. I will put a link to that in the description below. It is totally free and it's a great resource to print off and take with you to have on hand at the gym should you need to reference the order of these exercises. And if you want all the details pertaining to the how, the why, and the when to use dynamic warm-ups, you can check that out over on my first video in this playlist where I go over all of these facets in detail. All right, so feel free to follow along, and as always, make sure that you modify or skip any exercises or movements that don't feel good for you. Now, this is a generalized routine, meaning it can and should be modified as needed to help suit your individual needs. Okay, so here we go. Start this dynamic warm-up series by performing approximately 5 minutes of continual low-intensity movement with a particular emphasis on your lower body. The goal is to use this movement to begin elevating your heart rate, increasing blood flow throughout your legs, preparing your joints, and beginning to increase the sympathetic activity of your nervous system. Now, you can pick a movement of your choice. Jogging or walking on a treadmill works great, a rowing machine works great, a stationary bike like what I'm using here works quite well, or whatever else you have at your disposal. Just lower grade continual lower body movement for about 5 minutes. A-skips are movement-specific exercises that are common for track athletes. In the case of this warm-up series, we're just going to use them as a simple but effective way to begin to power up the major muscles of the lower body. So don't worry about getting super technical with your technique here, just focus on trying to punch your leg straight into the ground as you skip. Also, be sure to stay tall and relaxed throughout the exercise. C-runs are another specific warm-up exercise for track athletes, but again, for the purposes of this warm-up series, we're using them to help wake up your lower body, particularly your hamstrings. To perform this movement, you want to bring your heel straight up to the bottom of your butt cheek as quickly as possible. The key here is not to let your leg trail behind you. It needs to come straight up as quickly as possible. Be sure to stand tall and not lean forward when doing this movement. The forwards to backwards lunge is a movement that targets both the moving leg and the stance leg at the same time. The muscles of the hip around the stance leg will have to engage to support your body weight, while the quadriceps, hamstrings, and glute max on the moving leg will have to work to propel you out of each respective lunge position. Make sure that all phases of the movement are performed slowly and with perfect balance and control. Try your best to stand on one single leg without placing the foot of your moving leg on the ground between each repetition. You can quickly tap your foot on the ground as you transition from one lunge into the next, but keep it brief if you do so. Perform all repetitions on one leg before switching to the other. The lateral lunge will help to open up your hips while mobilizing the muscles on the inner thigh, which are known as the groin muscles. For this movement, it's best to start with small, gentle weight shifts side to side and gradually progress into deeper lunges. Perform as many small side-to-side shifts as needed until you feel you can slightly increase the range. Repeat this process until you're dropping down as far as you comfortably can. Don't force anything here. You should feel a brief, mild stretch with each repetition. The world's greatest stretch, as it's known, targets the hip joint and all major muscles crossing the joint. Each hip and respective leg are stretched at the same time, regardless of which leg you step out with the only difference being which particular muscles are stretched. And this movement should be performed by taking an exaggerated step forwards while trying to keep the back leg as straight as possible throughout the entire movement. The more you bend this knee, the less effective the stretch will be. Drop your elbow inside of your knee as low as possible, but don't force anything. You can perform all repetitions on one side first, and then switch legs, or you can alternate. The open and close gait exercise helps to mobilize the hip joint while activating some of the critical muscles around the hip that help to control its movement. This movement should be performed slowly and with perfect balance at all times. Slower is much more preferable than faster. Now place your hand on a wall or stationary object to help you with your balance if needed. And be sure to lift your leg each time as high as you can while retaining control of your movement. It may help to imagine that your foot is trying to clear a hurdle when bringing the foot forwards and backwards. The leg cradle to RDL is a combined movement that will help to stretch some of the deep rotator muscles in the one hip while activating the stabilizing muscles in the hip of the stance leg. This exercise should be performed with slow, controlled movement in order to optimize its effectiveness. As you pull your leg up into the cradle position, be sure to pull above your ankle and not on your foot, as pulling on your foot below your ankle might irritate the ankle joint if done aggressively. Do your best to transition from the cradle into the RDL without resting your foot on the ground, since the more time you spend on the stance leg, the more you'll challenge its hip muscles. The 90-90 seated hip rotation will help to mobilize the hip capsule while also targeting the rotator muscles of the hip. This movement should not be painful or produce any sharp pinching pains in the front of the hip. Now, if the movement is too uncomfortable to perform with your knees and hips bent to 90 degrees, straighten your knees and hips slightly. This will reduce the range of motion that the hip must rotate through. Also, the more you lean back, the less demanding the movement will be. The greatest challenge comes from keeping the hips and knees bent to 90 degrees while rotating with the hands off the floor. A good progression to start with is smaller rotations while leaning back and progressing to hands off the floor. Now you can also opt to lean forward at the end of each rotation, as this will place a greater stretch through the hip rotator muscles. Leg swings are one of the few ballistic movements I include in generalized dynamic warm-ups. Just make sure you don't make them too ballistic beyond what feels best for you. You should swing your leg in a way that produces a quick motion, but without forcing your hip or leg beyond ranges that feel comfortable. And you can perform your swings while supporting yourself with a dowel, or you can perform them while holding onto a stationary object, such as a squat rack, or even with your hand against the wall. Perform your leg swings side to side and then front to back. Drop squats are used to help activate and prep your nervous system, and as such, I tend to perform these activation-based exercises at the end of a dynamic series once all other dynamic movements have been performed. For this exercise, you want to lower your body down to the bottom of the squat position as quickly as possible, typically by letting your lower body free fall to this position. Now, if you're not comfortable with letting your lower body drop quickly, simply perform fast squats until you're comfortable dropping into the squat position. The quick drop forces your muscles to react quickly in order to stop the movement, which requires a response initiated by your nervous system. So there you have it. Now, I have some other generalized dynamic warm-up series that you can use in addition to this one, so if you want to give those a try, check out the other videos in this playlist. All right, everyone, I will see you in the next video.